Hey, Grip Boy here. Hey, listen, this is a series of videos that will show you how in the middle of 2025, you can build a very durable quadcopter, both with easy to find parts, as well as something that is fully remote ID and FAA compliant. By the way, if you are having trouble finding these parts, please check out my site at searchfpv.com. Now, on to the videos. Hey, Grip Boy here. So, you all saw the video where I lost my baby. It's very, very sad. But you know what? Good news. That gives me the opportunity now to build a new one. And I had a bunch of folks actually ask to see my process for doing this, so I figured why not? I'll try to make a video and kind of go through all the parts and kind of show you how I assemble and build the thing. So, what we're starting with, of course, is the Demibot 5-inch frame. That will be powered by the SpeedyBee F7 V3 Stack, and this does have a 50 amp BL Heli 32 ESC. Let's see, then of course, newbie drone flow motors. I really do love these motors. In fact, most of my quads have these. These are 1850 kV and 2306.5. I don't know why they do the weird size like that, but again, you know, I definitely do love these motors. The video transmitter, of course, will be the DJI 04 air unit because I, of course, love it as well. And then next, the actual control link, will it be Express LRS? Well, I know it will not. It will be Crossfire. And along with the Crossfire, I will put an Immortal T antenna. And then finally, we have the BM10Q GPS module with remote ID. And then all of these miscellaneous 3D printed parts that I printed out to go on this guy. So let's see, we've got the arm protectors, the camera mount. I have the antenna and the mount for the GPS. And of course, the camera mount for the 04 camera, which of course is a weird one, but so we got that. So we're going to make all of this come together. You ready? Here we go. By the way, I sure hope that everybody here can appreciate the fact that I have very little workspace. My desk is a friggin' mess. I think this is probably a lot more how you guys do it. So cool thing with this, of course, is it goes by, you know, either 20 by 20 or 30 by 30 stacks. The whole point of the press nuts is you can insert them based on the stack you're going to use. So we are going to go ahead and put the press nuts in a 30 by 30 spot. And so the way that this works is we get this one screw that's in here. Let's get a press nut out. All right, and the washer that's in here. There, well, cool. So we are aiming for the 30 by 30 holes. Now, of course, these press nuts, they have the keyed part on the outside, the tapered part on the inside, which is rough. That's going to be drilled into the carbon. So we'll kind of stick it like right over where the hole is going to be. Then we will take our screw here, put the washer on here. And so the whole point of this screw is to drive this press nut into the carbon. So we'll do our best to make sure that's lined up. Here we go. We're screwing it in. Be careful. As soon as that sucker is seated, don't go any further or you will end up really regretting some of your life choices. And that looks good. Okay. So now we will rinse and repeat with the other 3 holes. Keep that for later in case we need it. It's, you know, no reason not to have spare parts. Go ahead, actually, I'm going to start with the stack screws. All right, so I got our stack screws on here loosely. So just to kind of help, you know, as this works, right? So that square piece will go in here. The legs will kind of like go around that square piece, and this square piece actually kind of holds itself and actually offers a little additional tension to make this frame really stiff. It's one of the reasons I like to do good cinematic work with this frame. So what I do is I like to go ahead and mount two, and remember, do these loosely, right? Because you're going to need to wiggle this stuff around as it comes together. So let me get one of these little these are the longer countersink screws. And we will thread this, of course, through the hole here, get him. There we go. Yeah, we don't want to do too tight, just enough to barely grab so that we've still got some wiggle room to play around with. Okay, screw number 2, arm number 2. All right. Get that to line up with the hole. There we go. Loosely bound that in there. There we go. All right, now I got 2 arms in there relatively loose. And now we've got a spot in there that we can kind of drop this square piece in to hold it in place. Just like that. Give it a little bit of a tap and a wiggle until I finally see this hole in the middle line up. And I might even also push it in there a little bit with my screwdriver. There we go. That hole is now lined up in the middle piece. Now I'm going to loosely put one of these in the middle there. And we'll get him just to bite a bit into that press nut. Again, you don't want to tighten these all the way down because we still want to be able to wiggle these around. Okay, there, he's bit into the press nut. Now we will the other 2 legs. Also, if you tighten these way down, this will be so tight you'll have a really hard time to get these other legs in. So that's why you want to make sure all this stuff is fit relatively loose. Oh, see, that's, there we go. Yeah. There we go. And last arm. All right. Countersink screw. Aim for the hole. There it is. All right. Okay, and with all those in, now we can go ahead and start tightening those. Now remember, you don't want to tighten too much because those press nuts do strip out easily and they're kind of a pain in the butt to replace. Okay, now finally I'm going to go ahead and we're going to get these stack screws tightened all the way down. Okay, there we go, nice and tight. And there we are. Normally you would mount the ESC this way, right? With the balance plug coming off the rear. And that probably isn't such a bad idea. In fact, you could probably do that pretty easily. Because here's the VTX, right? So we'll kind of line it up with the holes. And you see there's actually quite a good amount of space here. But one thing that I like to do, because I like things being secure, and I like the fact that there's a lot of room here, is I'm actually going to take the ESC and I'm going to mount it backwards like this. Now see, I'll have a whole lot of extra room. I could actually lay like a buzzer or something like that. And then I'll have a lot of space up here. One of the other things that this will let me do is that there's 2 standoffs here. There's not really any standoffs here. The last 2 standoffs are all the way in the rear. But these 2 standoffs, when they go in here, and you'll see this as we build, that gives me a place where I can actually tie down the balance, or the plug coming off the ESC, and the capacitor too. I can actually affix the capacitor sideways to one of those standoffs to hold it in place, because there's so much room. Like here is where the DJI camera or the VTX camera is going to sit. It's actually going to sit kind of like right up here. And so you can see there's a lot of room here to work with. And so I'm going to take advantage of that in this build. Now, because the the plug between the ESC and the flight controller is short, and the ESC of course plugs into this middle plug here, that means that I am going to backwards too. So later when I actually fix this in software, you're going to actually, you know, I'll have to do that, but you'll see us do that when I do that fix. So basically, that's how that's going to look. One last note, and I just kind of want to point this out, and just particularly on this frame. So there is this press nut here in the middle and the bottom of the ESC. Now there is quite a lot of room, and you can actually see that there, I believe, hopefully. But you know, just in case, like if I have a hard impact or something here, I don't want to end up in the situation where the bottom of the ESC grounds out on here. So I'm probably going to put a piece of electrical tape or something here to kind of guard that from happening, so that if there is contact, even for a brief minute, the electrical tape will insulate that from the rest, or from the ESC. Okay, so next it's the motors, and I've got these little 3D printed pieces here. Here you go. You'll see that they are made to guard the motors. I'm going to do it what you might think is upside down. There, I'm going to go ahead and put this piece on the top so that, there we go, like that. So that the underside, you can see those are inside. You'll see the holes through, and then the motor is going to mount on top of that little skid. And everybody is going, well, that's just crazy. Why would you do that? And actually, two reasons. One is the bottom of these will just break. I mean, the screws will go through that. They'll come right off, right? So we want those to last as long as possible. That will definitely make sure it does it. Two, that little layer of TPU between the arm and the motor is actually going to dampen some of the vibration a little bit. Yes, we have RPM filtering on that's going to have, you know, help a little bit as well too, but in this case, we're actually going to go ahead and take advantage of the fact that with the motor on there, that'll hold that arm guard on there, and it will even offer a little additional vibration protection against noise or anything else like that. So that's always been my thing. So we're going to reach into the bag of motor screws, and these are the cap head, or the cap head screws. They're a little longer. You'll use, you know, your 2.5 millimeter driver here. So let me get that through one of the holes, and I'll get this motor going and probably not bother to show you the rest because, you know, there's really no reason for that. But I'll get this first motor going here. There we go. Right. And here we go. There we go. That is one motor on there. We've got some isolation dampening happening between the arm and the motor. And let me see if we can actually see in there. And I might do, you'll notice that that motor screw doesn't even quite reach to the top, right? The bottom there, I mean, it's barely through there. And that's exactly how I like to see a motor screw. So, you know, and definitely in some cases, this TPU actually helped with that position, and the TPU is offering additional resistance. So that motor screws, those screws are not coming out anytime soon. And so that's how I like to do that. So now I'm going to go ahead and finish up and do all four motors. And there you go. All four motors are done. I've got the things on. So we're going to go, and you notice I also did put that piece of black electrical tape there to kind of insulate the bottom of the ESC from that one press nut there in the middle. So now the next thing I like to do is we'll put this aside. And now I am going to get the ESC out, and we're going to go ahead and tin it up. Okay, and here we are about ready to solder. So I've got my soldering iron at 750 degrees Fahrenheit. I think that somewhere close to 390, something like that. I don't know, maybe I'll put some text around here somewhere that tells you what the conversion is. But anyway, so yeah, so we're gonna tin up this ESC. Yeah, let's get to it. So take our flux pan, get a good liberal amount of flux on those pads. Make sure my tip is nice and clean. Oh yeah, that's a good clean tip. And then I do like to put a little dab of solder there on the tip. using a wet tip. It does definitely help with the heat transfer. So I can rub that around on there, get some good heat, and there we go. I'll put a link to a soldering tutorial here too. Now remember, it's important to get the surface hot. You want to make sure that the surface is hot, and then you add solder to the hot surface. I like to kind of keep the solder hot, and then I don't know if you could see or not, but I kind of tend to pick up the tip, and so I'm keeping the solder hot while I feed the cold stuff into the blob, and then that kind of makes it grow in size, and then we end up with these nice little solder lumps, just like that. I do see one little boo-boo here. It looks like I made a little bit of a solder bridge right there, so take care of that really quick just by a little swipe like that, and there we go. No problem, all taken care of. I'll make this a little bit closer to me so I can see just a little better. A little bit of that on the tip. Heat transfer. And again, while I'm doing this, you can see that I am heating the pad and then using the hot pad to start melting the solder. And then as my blob grows, I like to pull the head of the iron away so that the blob can just kind of grow on its own. There we go. Here we go. Okay, so now for the big ones. Now, you'll notice some people kind of point out the fact, hey, there's holes there that you can put the feet of the capacitor through. And yes, you can do that. And in fact, there's nothing wrong with doing that. But like I told you earlier, I like to use one of the standoffs here to mount the capacitor to. So I can mount it vertically and keep it out of the way. And you'll kind of see as this comes along and why that's good. Now I'm going to go ahead on this and I'm going to turn my heat up. I like to have a hotter heat on the main battery leads because there's usually a lot more material that conducts heat away. And so these can be a lot more difficult to get a good blob on, but that's what we're going to do now is we're going to go ahead and get a really good solder blob on that, good amount of flux. All right. Make sure I have a clean tip. You might notice too, by the way, when you turn your heat up, your tip will get dirty a lot quicker. That just is the way it is. Okay, a little bit for heat transfer. There we go. Okay, it's good and all, but we can do better. All right. Okay, a little bit on this side. actually hitting the non-pad. There we go. A little bit more on the one side because I'm not happy. Looks like I overheated it and some solder ran off. So I'm gonna go ahead and get this all melty again. Here. Let's see if we can't get a little bit here. There we go. That I'm happy with. And so now we are to the point where we can take this guy. And remember, I'm going to go ahead and mount it in here backwards. And we'll start doing some motor wires. So here we are. Because I like to run with my props running out, I like to actually put the motor wires up along the inside, or rather outside of the legs here, and that kind of protects them from prop strikes. I like to have my motor wires go between the ESC and the stack, around the stack screw, and then come back out and get to the solder pad that way. I feel that that's just extra protection for the wire, just in case, you know, to make sure for sure you're not going to get anything that's going to interfere or hit the wires. I just feel that maybe it protects them a little better, and I just like the way it looks a little better. So when I do this, of course, I'm going to take my 3 wires and I try to work for the outside wire, try to kind of keep them, I guess, lined up, maybe just for my own OCD, so to speak, so that the wires stay, you know, in side by side, rather parallel with each other, so that the outside motor wire will go to the third pad, the middle pad, and then the inside motor wire will come around here. I just feel that that's best for the cable management. So when I do this, so I kind of like hold the motor wire down along here as far as, you know, gauging the size. So I'll hold it down in front of the arm. I will then run that thing kind of the way that it would normally run. And then, yeah, then we go ahead and we start routing around. So here's the inside one, kind of wrap that around here. And let's see where we should cut. So that's going to go to the first motor pad there, right about there. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and grab that guy, grab my clippers here. We're going to go ahead and give a little extra slack because we can always, you know, we can always deal with too much, but too little is kind of a bummer. There we go. We'll cut that off right there. All right, then for the middle wire, just the middle wire is going to go right beside of this outer one. And it's going to go ahead and wrap in here and come into the middle pad. Let's make sure that we are, here we go. We'll cut that off about where it should be. And then the outside one, of course, we're following suit along with these. Make sure that we kind of sort of route it this way. And then keep in mind as we come in here, right, they're going to be more of an angle. And so I kind of take that into account. You kind of see what I mean once we have them all soldered up and in place. Let's see, so we'll hit down right about there. And then I'm going to save these extra pieces of motor wire actually for the capacitor. And you'll see, basically, I'm going to use pieces of this wire to run the capacitor I'm going to mount here over to the battery pads on the ESC. All right. So I'll set those little pieces aside. We'll now go ahead and I will cut these off. And you don't need to really cut off a lot here. In fact, generally, oh yeah, that looks good. See, check out the sizes on that. Looks like we measured really good. Generally, I take off maybe 1 millimeter, maybe 2 millimeters of the insulation here. And that usually does just fine as far as, you know, provide contact to the ESC. So there we go. All right. We'll go ahead and twist these up a little bit. Now, I've seen a lot of people use a little bit more wire here, which I guess you can do. I personally try to get these so that the insulation on the wire comes as close to or in contact with the solder blob that I am actually soldering to. And I just feel that that just makes sure that everything's insulated and protected well. So here now I'm just twisting the ends here really quick. Getting that all hooked up. And grab my little alligator clip here. I do love this stand. This makes this very handy. There we go. That'll hold all the wires for me. And now we can go ahead and tin these up to do a little bit of flux on the end of the wires. I just think that that just helps them soak or wick in the solder a lot better. And again, I do like using a wet tip, so I'll put a bit of blob here on the end. And then we go ahead and touch the wire and feed in the solder. There we go. Nice. Nice. All right, those are tinned. Okay. And in this case, I'm going to go ahead and start with the inside one first. So the first thing I want to do is I want to put a little bit more flux here on our solder joints and a little bit of flux on each one of these as I drop it in. And then if all goes well, it should go pretty easily. So I'll grab this guy here. Maybe if I tried to do this right-handed instead of left-handed, here we go. Here we go. That looks pretty good. And yeah, I might be applying a lot of flux, but I don't think there's a rule out there that says you can use too much. I just think it makes for better joints, honestly. All right, so this guy down here. Make sure my tip is clean. There we go. Very nice. Okay. You see those kind of trace each other pretty nicely around there. All right, last one. A little extra flux on the wire. And see, this one's coming in more of an angle to kind of match everything else. Oh, that's a little dirty. Clean that up. There we go. It's a little better. There we go. All right, there we have good three good solder joints. Give the motor a spin and make sure it still spins freely like this, just to make sure that you didn't, you know, cross any wires or have any fet drag. This is a good way to make sure that you are solid. And yeah, that looks pretty good. Okay, and there we are. We have all of our motor wires soldered up very nicely. And now I think we will move on to the XT-60. Since we're going to be coming off the side, right, and you can kind of see here, see the plugs are sort of the same length. I want this plug to kind of bend backwards like this, and you might actually already notice, and I'll kind of show that up there a little bit better for you there, but you'll see that because of the bend, it's actually changing the lengths. Now on this ESC, the negative terminal is here, the positive's here. And so I really want these to both, you know, kind of line up on those pads and also kind of give this natural bend to the plug so that it follows along the back of the battery. That makes it a lot easier to stick it in the battery straps and, you know, kind of helps you sort of keep this out of the way. That way, even when you're naturally letting go, it sort of has this tendency, you see, to kind of bend backwards. So I kind of like to do that. You can even, if you really want to really exaggerate it, you can do that. I'm not going to. I'm just going to let the natural bend kind of go through. And then since, of course, since they are going to be coming off here side by side, you're going to, you know, see the negative here is going to be, you know, if we're doing that side by side right about there. And I'm going to go ahead and use the full tinned edge there on that. Give me just a sec though, because of course I'm going to retin that. But I just kind of do this little shape up here, kind of see where that's going to be. And actually one thing that maybe we should look at is the fact, you know, there is going to be a standoff there. And one of the reasons I run it out the front here, especially on this frame, is the fact that this standoff actually is going to be providing some of the pressure relief or strain relief on that, because I'm going to zip tie this battery lead to the standoff so that, you know, if you eject a battery or it gets yanked on really bad, you're pretty much going to save yourself. So let me go ahead and let's see. So yeah, and again, you know, since these are using the countersink screws, we're going to use the shorter of the countersink screws here. I'm going to twist this standoff on there, and of course we don't have to do it too tight, but I just kind of want to have it there so I can kind of see how this thing is going to flow around here. There we go. All right, so I got the one standoff there. Let's see. The motor wires are going around the flight controller, and they're going to go, like I said before, they're going to go in the front. So they're probably going to go right there in front of the standoff, which means the battery leads are probably going to be like kind of like right there, just coming right off the side to the standoff. And so that's important to see. So yeah, so that I want to kind of keep these parallel as best I can. Let's see if we can get this to fit properly. So first let's put this here and let's see if I'm liking it. So one thing I'm definitely not digging here, and you can see there's not a whole lot of room. So I might actually even go as far as running these out this direction on the standoff. And so as I do that, and you kind of see I'm sort of trying to hold everything fit here. Now we can kind of see, you know, based on how this is routing, where I'm going to need to trim the positive lead on this terminal, because we kind of want the, right, we want the battery to just kind of flow out that side, that direction. So let me just make sure we got this. All right. Lining up that solder blob there that we're going to, again, we are going to retin this edge here. This is going to run next to that. So now I'm going to hold this in place so I can see where that is. And then I'm going to come along with my snippers very carefully. And we're going to go to a little bit past the edge of the solder blob down there and try not to cut the motor wires if I can help it. It's right about there. So we're going to go ahead and snip that off. And if you watch me do that, you'll see that I kind of gave enough room there to also peel back some insulation. So there we go. Then I'm going to use the cutters here to pull off some of that. There we go. Perfect. All right, now we're going to twist this nice and neat. Now I'm going to heat up my soldering iron to 850 degrees Fahrenheit. I'll probably put some conversion that lets you know, I don't know, somewhere that is in Celsius. So here we go. So yeah, so the objective, of course, is to retin this with my solder. I know that companies like to ship these with lead-free solder, and that sucks. Lead-free does. So good old leaded, bad for the environment solder we're going to use just because it flows nicer. I'm going to go ahead and tin that. I'm going to get some, or rather I'm going to put some flux on there, put some flux on here. Did I just? Yes, I did. Okay, let me twist that. Get some flux on there. I like putting flux on the wire because it does sort of help the wire wick the solder in. And you will find, yeah, if you haven't done these before, you'll discover that these suckers do dissipate a lot of heat, so a lot of heat is required. And grabbing the solder, go. And again, I do kind of like to do the thing with the wet tip, so I'll put a little bit of dab of solder here on the tip to help sort of conduct heat. There we go. Yep. All right, perfect. And now for this guy. Come on, buddy. Start taking in the heat. Come on. See what I mean about how this thing's really... Come on. Let's get her down. There we go. Now we're starting to... There we go. Yeah. All right. Good amount of solder. There we are. Nice. All right. Now for the fun part. There you go. Of course, be careful. These will probably be a little hot. Let's see. So, as we sort of figured it out, do another quick test fit here. See, that's going there. That's going there. That's going there. Perfect. All right. Positive first, since that's on the inside, so to speak. See, I know I'm not the only one that doesn't have the most perfect build space in the world. There we go. I can actually kind of grab up on this a little bit higher. There we go. And try to get that as touching the standoff like that. And then here we go. Water's melting. A little bit of wet solder on there. Grab this. And there we go. Get that as close as we can right there. All right. There we go. That one, I like that one. That one, pretty good. All right, so fix this.